Everybody, I'm Brian Koss, and this is Beyond the Sermon. Last week's sermon was about Money Matters,
Yeah.
the love song series,
Yeah.
and which
Sweet 80s theme, by the way.
that's right, love the '80s.
Yeah.
It's a great era, but money is one of those things. Like we all have it.
Right.
It's something that I think is a sore topic for most people,
Right.
whether it's an individual or as a couple in a marriage.
Right.
So I would love to talk further about that and maybe have you kind of elaborate on a few points or a point
Yeah.
about money and how you think couples should be with money.
Yeah. Well, it definitely is one of those things that we have to talk about, right? Money, just like I'd said, money, like everything else, spending over money, handling of the money, comes down to daily habits. And so we should be aware of what we're doing even before we do it, and like directing our money instead of being directed by our money.
Right.
Really, because that's the fear of the whole thing. It's like that we just have money, and then the pursuit of money or pursuit of things dictates our life instead of us sending money to where we want it to go. So I think in the context of marriage, it is that open, honest conversation. It's just doing whatever it takes for a couple to sit down and get on the same page financially. Oneness in marriage, and there's so much about this, but oneness in marriage is a spiritual thing, it's a relational thing, it's a physical thing, and it's also a financial thing.
Right.
It's getting on the same page of, hey, what are our goals? But also discussing goals, but also discussing how we're going to get there. Because it's one thing to have a goal, and that's amazing. I think everybody should have goals. I think goals are amazing. I think vision is key to all of that. But how are we going to get there?
So when you mean get there, like what does that look like? What does that vision look like for a family as far as getting there? Like getting debt free, making sure there's like so much money in like a savings account into a retirement account. So when you mean get there, is it like a plethora of different things, or is it just one singular thing?
Yeah, it's a bunch of different things, and I'm not a financial planner by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, Dave Ramsey, Financial Peace University, they're great. Look them up, YouTube them. There's so much free content out there to help people. Like,
so you're not going to yell at people
you and me.
on
I
the
might.
phone,
I might.
like
You
Dave
never
Ramsey
know.
does.
You never know. I'm not going to make you feel bad, right? He does that really well, by the way.
He does.
It's like some of his stuff's really good and it stings, and I know that he does it for a reason. Some people need that sting, like that shock factor of like, I did this, to change.
Right.
I don't really presume that I'm going to get there, but I do think that there are a plethora of things that we should do, but one of the things that I even stressed is the fact that we operate so many times out of a belief of lacking, or we have a misunderstanding of money, thinking that it's just there to help us to be comfortable.
Right.
Or to feed a insecurity. And if we're insecure, money's not going to fix that. Mm-hmm. Jesus fixes that insecurity.
Right.
So if we just want money to fix that insecurity, you're only going to find out that you could put as much money in there, but it's just going to keep going.
Right.
And so I think that's the thing that I would think about as far as that goes. It's like, and that's the reason why I talked about it in the sermon, the point of that insecurity, like what is that insecurity? Mm-hmm. Why is it that we are feeling like we don't have enough? So therefore, you'll never make enough if that's the problem.
I feel like that insecurity almost goes back to childhood for a lot of people, like seeing their parents struggling and not having enough.
Sure.
And just that scarcity mindset. Then when they grow up, like, hey, I'm not going to be like that. I'm not going to be like my parents. Like I'm going to hoard and have all this. And the more money I have, the more secure I'm going to feel, the better I'm going to feel.
Right.
So
yeah, and what's really sad is people who have that scarcity mindset, they start believing that they're not worth having more.
Yeah.
Like I've seen that so many times. It's like somebody, they grew up in a certain generation or whatever. They just didn't have a lot of things. They grew up a very meager childhood where they weren't allowed to have even a few things.
Yeah.
So then they can start believing that they're not even worth happiness, which is why the last thing that I talked about is spend joyfully, because that's a problem. People hold on to their money. Sometimes they hold on to their money instead of using it to bless others or to be a blessing even within their own family, to take a family trip. Even if they have the money in the bank, sometimes they don't do that.
Yeah. I thought that was a really good point on Sunday. You said, if everyone's taken care of, go out and spend a little on yourself.
Yes.
You know, if you want to, like, if you want to get something, like, it's not a sin to buy yourself a pair of pants or a jacket or a pair of shoes, or,
Right.
you know, as long as your family's taken care of it and you've put money towards that vision that you were talking
Yeah,
about.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that's great. And you don't hear that very often.
Yeah, I mean, we should work hard, you know, providing for your family. That's key. You know, I think we should, if we're followers of Jesus, we should give generously. So there should be that tithe, right? Malachi 3:10. So we should bring the tithes into the storehouse, but then also give over and above that. We see that in the New Testament in 2 Corinthians 9, of just being people who would be willing to do that if God would so inspire us to do it. And if that's the case, I'm like, good grief, go have a nice meal.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think that's not us squandering money if your needs are being met.
Yep.
And you've invested. That was another point. Investing wisely.
Yep.
You've done those things. Man, go enjoy the blessing that God's given you.
Yeah, enjoy a steak every now and then.
You know what? There's nothing wrong with the steak. You know, nothing wrong with the steak.
So you were talking about communication. So let's say there's a couple that has a hard time communicating with one another about money, or maybe it's just, you know, one spouse, like one maybe is just all about communicating and one's not. So how does a couple combat that to keep their marriage good?
Yeah. If you're going to have the conversation, I think that you have to think about the environment. Like, if you're going to have the conversation, the environment probably shouldn't be, you know, you're getting ready to go to a kid's activity and you've been reluctant to have the conversation, and then 5 minutes before you go in there, you just open this huge can of worms talking about money, and now you're going to go in there, and now it's like, and then that creates hostility, right, towards that conversation and money.
Oh, yeah.
And so I think we need to be wise even about the atmosphere of when and where that conversation's had. One of the things that I've advised, and Marla and I have done this, not consistently through the years, but we've done this, is we've set a date on the calendar
To have a conversation?
Absolutely. It's like, hey, we're gonna have our money talk at this day, but you set it around a date night, so it's nice, it's pleasurable, it's a nice meal, it's, you know, it's those kinds. It can be at home, it could be your favorite meal at home, or it could be something out of town, but you have a conversation. And oftentimes outside of the home even helps, because if you're gonna have the conversation over a meal, you tend to be more emotionally regulated in public.
Sure.
So I think that helps, and just kind of working through, and again, the atmosphere matters.
Yeah. Well, safety in numbers too. I mean, if
There's that.
You got to talk about your wife, like, hey, sweetie, I bought this really cool tool, or this
Yeah,
cool,
exactly.
or for me, it'd be a camera.
Right.
And if there's a big, room full of people, it'd be like, hey, you can't yell at me.
Yeah.
You can't get on me. I'm safe now until dessert, and then or the check comes.
Yeah. But I mean, that's one of those things too. You even mentioned that, of course, that's a joke, but that was one of the things that I found out too from the study, is how many couples have hidden money from their spouse, or hidden money or hidden possessions that they purchase from, or purchases from their spouse. And I'm thinking, man, it's like, that's just a breeding ground for insecurity too. So if somebody already struggles with financial insecurity, right, from scarcity mindset, and then if that is happening to them in the context of that relationship, it just deepens the wound.
Right.
And then it makes it harder to talk about next time.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think, if getting back to your question, like how do you have the conversation? It's, don't go into it with an agenda of what I want. Go into it with a shared vision of, hey, what do we want?
Right.
So maybe you've never had a conversation about finances, and that you maybe just set a point in the future, 30 years from today, and say, what would you want us to be like? What kind of people do you want us to be like, or do you see us being like in 30 years? What does our lifestyle look like? What does our family look like?
Right.
And then start looking at that vision and say, okay, well, if we intend to get there with that vision, how is it that we should do that? Or what can we do today to feed into that shared vision? That way it's not a tug of war. It's not me against you. It's not her against him or whatever. It's like, we've decided ahead of time, this is what we're after.
Yeah, baby steps.
It is. But you have to have that long view, if not, because we want to get back to daily habits.
Right.
And you want to get back to having those conversations. The basis of those conversations is going to be the vision that you preset together.
Yeah. No, that's good. Do you think there should be because when I'm hearing this conversation, like these baby steps and the vision, it almost sounds painful. And I'm just talking for me, like,
Sure.
oh, we got to do this, and you feel restricted. Do you think it's good for couples to have almost like a carrot dangling in front of them a little bit, like almost like a reward? Like, hey, we were really good for 6 months. Let's reward ourselves. Or like we've been good for a year. Let's reward ourselves. Do you think that's healthy for a couple if they agree on that within the conversation that they've had about their vision?
Maybe. But I think as far as on a daily or weekly or, every month or something, I think the better way to go is 6 months is a long time, right? It's a long time to be looking forward to something.
Right.
I mean, there could be something like that, but I think even if you decide you get together and you have a conversation about finances and then you decide where all, paying your bills out, right? You're gonna give generously, you're gonna invest wisely, you're gonna pay your bills, and then the remainder of the money, then that's the fun part. And you said the kind of the dangling the carrot, but I think that too is for us to feel empowered over our money to say, okay, at the end of this payday, whatever the amount is that you have for pleasure, to say, hey, we actually have $50 this payday to go do something.
Yeah.
Well, you don't have to wait 6 months. You could wait 6 months. Maybe you save up that $50 over the 6 months and you get to do something big.
Right.
But maybe on that payday, it's $50 that you have left over, and now you can decide together to go have an experience, right? To go, maybe it's a meal, but maybe with your family, it's like, hey, we want to do a picnic and go to the park because the park's cheap. And for the most point, the park is free.
Right.
So it's like, hey, we're going to have this meal and go to the park, and that way you get a whole day's worth of activity for $50.
Yeah.
Rather than you go to dinner and you have an hour for $50.
Yeah. So you're creating an experience and memories, and
right.
being able to enjoy, invite the kids if they want to be a part of it too.
Sure.
No, that's
Sure.
good. Yeah. What about purchases? Because, a lot of, couples, like, the husband will see, like man toys, right? New car or a side-by-side, or if you live in Taylorville, it seems like everybody has a golf cart.
I know. We're a golf cart friendly community, so that's why I think.
Golf carts are expensive.
They are.
So I was talking to this one guy, and he had a side-by-side, and I go, I saw one at the store, and it was like $8,000, and he kind of laughed at me. He's like, mine's like 20. And I'm like, that's a car. Like, why don't you just get in your car and go, well, it's not much fun. And but I mean, these so like something like that, where it's a big purchase.
Right.
Obviously, the right answer is, both the husband and the wife have to agree on that. But what happens when, like, a husband just makes the purchase and goes, well, and tries to justify it, or the let's say the wife, and all of a sudden the husband comes home and there's 20 Amazon boxes,
right?
And she tries to justify it. So if there's couples out there like that, how can they kind of remedy that problem a little bit? Do they just scale it down? Do they just stop altogether? I mean, what's your advice on that?
One of the things that Marla and I have done is when we've had a little extra money, there's times and seasons to everything, right? There's times and seasons where you have no extra money, to where I talked about $50 in a payday. There's other times where it's $10, right? Like, it just depends on where you are and what, your lifestyle and stuff. But one of the kind of guiding principles that Marla and I have abided by for a long time when we've had some extra money, and I've advised couples of this same thing in premarital counseling, is decide a certain amount of money that you can spend without the other person buying in. Because you pre-decided that, we can say it's $100. So if it's $100 and under, we can just buy it because we both know that there's money there for it, so it's fine.
That's smart.
But anything over $100, you're going to have a conversation about the purchase.
Right.
And so you're side by side. It's awesome. It's $20,000. That's a lot of $100 put together, right?
Yeah, it is.
So that's one of those things to where I think if you're going to honor one another, right? It's financial oneness. Yeah. It's coming together, having that open, honest conversation. Maybe you really want the side by side, and maybe you can't afford it. Maybe you can. Yeah. People in different situations.
Sure.
But I think when one has to ask the question, why?
Yeah.
Why are we just profusely buying things from Amazon? Right. Why, if we're struggling with delayed gratification, why. Why is it that we need that side by side?
It's the Joneses.
Right? It could be. It could be, But so I think that's what I would do is preset for a couple, preset, hey, we can spend this amount of money and you don't need to answer to it. It's fine.
Yeah.
But anything over that, at least you may still buy it, but at least we're going to have a conversation. That way you don't want to have the thing and then risk that that tension in the marriage all because you wanted that thing.
Right.
That tool. You wanted that, to update your DeWalt drill driver set or Milwaukee drill driver set, or I have to have another circular saw. I'm like, well, you already have one. I mean, do you need another one? If so, have a conversation about it.
Yeah. So that's a conversation my wife and I won't have because I'm not handy at all.
Right.
I don't have tools. If I did, I would be losing fingers.
Right.
So yeah, Jackie doesn't have to worry about, me and DeWalt.
She's good on that, right?
She'll probably end up buying the tool before me.
Right. Yeah. Suggestive purchase. Hey.
Yeah.
Oh, look, now you can fix this. But yeah, I think that's what it comes down to. I think it's those open, honest conversations. We should ask why. Why is it that we're spending money the way we are? Why is it that we feel like we need that thing? And is it something that only Jesus can fill the void of?
Right.
Rather than that purchase.
Yeah.
Because the love of money will lead us to do all sorts of terrible things.
It will.
And it's been the demise of many divorces, marriage problems. That's the reason why I entitled this message, Marriage Matters.
Yeah.
So let's put a wrap on this episode.
Sure.
And just, reminder to me, reminder to you, remember we're going beyond the sermon and taking it to the streets.
That's right. All right. We'll see you guys later.